Like most retail businesses, just because you build it does not mean they will come. Opening up a record store can be a ton of fun, certainly a lot of work, and a big part of that is making sure you understand who your customer is and understand how to drive them to your store to buy. We will discuss on this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local but you are in the U.S., you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com, and would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube and follow us across social media at NTX Vinyl on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. All right, this is part 6 in a series that I've called How to Open a Record Store. If you've watched any of the previous episodes in this series, you'll see I've talked through inventory, I've talked through branding, I've talked through a lot of pieces about getting up and rolling and how to stock your shop with the right inventory. One of the most important things, which is near and dear to my heart, is marketing. So on this episode, we're going to talk about social media, we're going to talk about advertising, we're going to talk about website, in-store, online, all those things that are absolutely critical for a record store to survive and potentially thrive. Now, I'll give you a little context. I started NTX Vinyl. It's been about 5 years, but for basically about 20 years prior to that, I did marketing. I did digital marketing and social marketing. I've done a lot of marketing specific to the music industry or the entertainment industry. I've done marketing with big brands. I have been on all sides of the fence in regards to the marketing of startup companies, established companies, whatever it may be. So I have a lot of experience in this area broadly. And then over the past 5 years, I've really honed it in and applied it to what I've been doing at NTX Vinyl. So what I hope to do is give you some tips and pointers and some things to think about. And if you are gonna, open your own store, you're thinking about opening your own store, this will give you some direction to go in to at least take the first foot forward. Because, like I said at the top of the video, retail is not the type of situation in most cases where you can pop open a store of any kind, physical, local, or online, and just expect that people are going to find you and start buying what you're selling. That's typically not how it works. Now, the the one outlier there would be if you're in a place where there's tons of foot traffic, so you have a built-in audience of people who are seeing your store, or same could be said for online. If you already have some way to get in front of a bunch of eyeballs online without having to advertise or market, well, then you're in a great spot. But in most cases, most businesses who start out, doesn't matter if it's a local or online or if it's a hybrid, they're starting from ground zero. And that's really the first thing to talk about here in regards to broad level marketing. And this is kind of marketing 101 stuff, but understanding who your buyer is. Like, that's the most critical thing at the very beginning as you're thinking about your record store. Again, doesn't matter if it's just online, if it's you've only got a mom and pop shop local and you don't sell online at all. That doesn't matter in regards to this specific talking point. Knowing your audience is absolutely critical. As I think about my audience and what I do, I basically sell to myself. I have created a brand with NTX Vinyl and a shop, physical locations, online locations, whatever it may be. And I have catered it all to sell to people like myself because that's what I know. I know what a 43-year-old guy who was in high school in the 90s wants to buy. As a generalization, there are always outliers, but most of my customers, and I can go look at the stats online, go look at my Facebook Insights or Instagram or TikTok, wherever it may be, And I can tell you that the vast majority of people who watch what I say on YouTube or buy an album from me online or walk into one of my local shops, 90% is males from ages 35 to 45, right? That's me. So I have doubled down on that. And that was very purposeful for me. I didn't set out to open a record store and sell every different genre, every different era. A, because it's not what I'm passionate about. B, because I'm not very knowledgeable about all different genres and all different eras, right? And it's just, I wanted to sell what I love. Like, I think that's probably the most important part, is making sure as you think about your audience and who you want to walk into your store or go to your site and buy from you, like, who would you prefer it to be? And then what is the reality? So understanding your audience and who your buyer is very, very important, because that's going to dictate a lot of what you do. It's going to dictate your inventory. It should dictate the look and feel of your shop, again, online or physical. And it should definitely dictate your goals in regards to advertising, marketing, and the way you present yourself. So one of the first things I would say, as you're thinking about setting up from a marketing perspective, maybe you've got a location or you've got a website and you're starting to curate inventory, is think about who your most likely buyer is, and think about what they would want to see in a record store. Maybe it's not the case of like with me, where I'm pretty much selling to people like myself. Maybe you're going after something different, and that's totally fine, as long as you can put yourself in their shoes. Like, that's the most important thing from a marketing perspective, is being able to understand the persona of the buyer, which means not only their age and their sex and their race, all those basic demographic things, location, but really their tastes and preferences, and those types of things are very, very important. So right off the bat, understand your buyer. And then you need to start establishing your presence. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, online presence is certainly something to consider. You want to, after you've, again, I think one of the early episodes talked about branding. So you've obviously at this point hopefully established what you're going to call your store, right? Whatever it may be, you need to make sure and go to Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all these places. Choose whichever ones you like to actually use, but the very least, go secure the handles, go secure those domains. And you can't always do that right off the bat. Like YouTube makes you hit, for example, makes you hit a certain number of subscribers before you can kind of name your channel. Point being is, put a stake in the ground with your name, so that way you own it, right, online. Now, in the physical world, it's the same type of thing. You got to put a stake in the ground. That means before you even have your shop up and running, be thinking about signage, be thinking about eyeballs. How are people going to discover your shop? Like I mentioned, just because you've built it does not mean they're going to come. So you've got to have a presence. And if you're just going to be standing in a physical location behind a counter with a bunch of records and hoping that people show up, my gut says you're going to be very disappointed, right? So think about what that looks like online and offline, as far as how you're going to establish yourself, so that local people, online people, whatever community is that you're going to hope to build, they've got a shot at discovering you. Very, very important. I would also say set goals. This is easier to do online, whether it be the number of people who've liked your Facebook page or followed you on Instagram, subscribed to your YouTube. I have monthly goals that I track all these with me and my team, and we try and hit those goals. And if we see, hey, growth has really, gone stagnant on this particular channel or in this particular way, what can we do to re-energize that, right? And so we'll come up with ideas on, hey, we haven't had many people joining our newsletter recently from our website. Okay, so let's go on some other channels where there are people and encourage them to join. Let's do a giveaway or promotion to get people to join our email list or our newsletter list, whatever it may be. So again, cross-pollinate those channels, establish goals so they're all building, and that's all online. What does that look like offline? Well, it's a lot harder to have goals. I mean, obviously you're going to have sales goals. You hope to sell this much each month, or you should be thinking in that way. And it'll take you a little while to get your bearings. You're not going to know what you're going to sell in month 1 or 2 or month 6 for that matter. But after you've been in this for a little while and you start to see that there's some consistency, then you can start to say, okay, we're steadily doing X number of thousands of dollars per month in revenue, or we're selling X number of records per month, whichever way you want to track it. How do we increase that? Set some goals on a monthly basis and then on a yearly basis of where you want to be. And the last thing I'll say, and this is kind of specific to social media, is do as much as you can to own your audience. And here's what I mean by that. If you are, I've seen this, there are great examples of this. There are record stores, um, again, primarily online, who really double down on just one channel or just maybe two channels. Maybe they only sell via Facebook auctions, or maybe they only sell on Instagram, whatever. That's great. Establish those channels, but be mindful that when it comes to third parties like that, Discogs is another example. There's plenty of record stores, their entire inventory, they only sell through Discogs. You just have to be careful because those platforms own those customers. And if at any point in time they decide to change something, or like in the case of social media, decide to throttle your reach, disabling your ability to reach those customers, that can be really impactful for your business. This is why I mentioned email. I mentioned a newsletter, or maybe it's a text-based list where you can SMS and text people. You need to own as much of your audience as you can. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with social media, since it does not cost money to have a page or a profile, that means that you don't own the audience. That means that that social media giant owns that audience, like a Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, which is Google, obviously, they own all that. So it's up to them what to do with that audience in regards to making change, editing the platform, or like I mentioned, throttling your ability to reach those people. So be kind of mindful of that. So that's all the high level stuff I want to touch on. Know who your audience is, establish a presence that you think gels with that audience. Set some goals in regards to growth on a monthly basis, and own as much as that audience as you can. Now, if you're talking about a mom and pop independent brick and mortar store, what are your goals there? Well, other than the revenue goals or number of albums sold, those are very economical goals that you can track on paper through a point of sale system, hopefully, as you're checking people out. But also, you need to be thinking about things like foot traffic. You need to be thinking about things like time of day, days of the week. When are people shopping? I will say, from my perspective, and I think this mirrors a lot of retail, especially in the music industry and the record business, is most of the buyers are going to buy on weekends. So you've got your Friday, Saturday, Sunday traffic. That's kind of the bulk of what's going to generate your sales. But what about all those other days a week? How are you going to capitalize on getting people into your store Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Are you going to even be open those days? Should you be open those days? A lot of those things you can't answer before you dive into this and you start experimenting. There's plenty of record stores, at least in our area, that are open 7 days a week. And there's others that are closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, because those days are just so slow, and it costs money to have an employee there, behind the desk for, whatever it is, 6, 8, 10 hours in a day. And there's only going to be a few people to walk through to buy a few records. You're going to be losing money every day in that scenario. So you need to be smart about that in regards to how you're staffing your store and what hours you work. And again, all of that is trackable. You need to be very mindful. So as you dive into this, always be thinking, track what I'm doing and try and measure it, because that's what's going to give you the ability to go back afterwards and go, what's working and what's not. Because if you don't know what's working or what's not working, you're going to struggle. That's just the reality of it, right? That's the reality of any business. All right. So let's talk specifically about social media next. And I've already touched on it a little bit. And the reality is, from my perspective, if you're going to run a successful business these days, you would be really, really naive to not take advantage of social media. And in some scenarios, I think you're just shooting yourself in your foot. There are record stores that have been around a long time that maybe don't use a lot of social media or don't put an importance on it. But again, they've been around a long time. They already have their audience. They already have their base. And so they don't necessarily need to rely on it. If you're just starting out, you've got to take advantage of every avenue possible in regards to getting in front of potential consumers. And obviously, social media is a way to do that. It is the number one way these days to make an impact and drive people to your store, physical or online. So here's what I would say. I already talked about establishing, your presence, which is essentially like securing all of the pages, the profiles, those types of things, your website, and anything that pertains to your name, going even higher level into branding, copywriting your name, all things like that. That can come with time. You don't have to do all that up front. But um, as it pertains to social media, and you think about like, how am I going to do this? I don't have the time to do this. Like, that's a real thing. You need to think about time commitment and think about how much you're going to bite off from the very beginning. You can go put some placeholders in place. Get your Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatnot, like all these different places, Discogs, all these places you can sell. Some are more geared towards social media versus just sales channels. But either way, put your stake in the ground across them and then pick the one or the couple that you're going to start with, because you can't do them all at once. And I would say most importantly is you've got to come up with some sort of point of view or a tone. And this goes back to, again, marketing 101. Like, who are you going to be? How are your posts on social media? How are your emails? How is your website? How is it going to differentiate from every other record store, right? Now, this doesn't have to be drastic, because in a lot of ways, record stores are record stores. They sell records, But if you want to be successful, you need to find a way to differentiate. You need to find a way to stand out. And on social media, whatever content you're pushing out, whether it's like, hey, we've got this new release, or hey, we saw this new article you might enjoy, or hey, it's the anniversary of someone's death, whatever it may be, whatever topical news, information, sales you're going to push out there as far as content is concerned, how is it perceived from your audience? Do they just see it as very bland, very copy and paste, very, hey, this could sound like it's coming from anyone, anywhere? Or do you have a unique point of view? Like, do you actually make it personal? I think personalization is incredibly important. The other thing I think is incredibly important is transparency. And you can probably see that by the fact that I'm sitting here filming this video and telling you how to do this. I'm very transparent in everything I do. People ask me questions all the time, and I pretty much tell them the answer. Like, don't beat around the bush, and feel free to message me with any questions you've got, and I'll answer them for you, right? As far as this, how to open a record store or anything else. But a point of view and a tone and personalization and transparency, those are all things that they seem like very lofty marketing type of phrases, and they are. But if you keep them in mind, it's a way for you to differentiate rather than just looking like every other post that every other record store puts out about every new release that comes out every week, or every collection you've found, whatever it may be, right? It's all about trying to differentiate yourself in the market, right? The other thing that's critical in regards to social media that you should be thinking about is community. This is huge. With everything you do on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, wherever it is, wherever you're choosing to have a voice, you need to be thinking about, how am I going to build community around my store? In a lot of ways, that means physical events. That means actually getting people into the store, shaking their hands, introducing yourself, inviting them back, answering their questions, providing them with helpful feedback, whatever it may be. That's going to create a community. And everything I just said in regards to that physicality of someone walking into your local store, that can all be replicated and even actually done better in some ways online. And so you need to think about, how are you going to establish that? I've got communities built in a lot of different places. YouTube is one of them, where I've got a lot of people who talk to me on YouTube, watch my videos, that maybe they don't even follow what I do on Facebook. Maybe they're not even on my email list. Like, that's fine. And it goes vice versa. I've got a Facebook group specifically called Now Spinning, I've mentioned before, and that's a great community of people that are all over the world. Some of them are my regular customers and my friends who shop with me locally. Some of them are on the other side of the world, and I'll never meet, and they can't even buy from me because I don't ship internationally. But it's still a community I build, and they understand who I am, what NTX Vinyl is, and kind of who the shop is trying to be, right? That goes back to that point of view. So community is really big. And then as it pertains to your content, I think you need to think about balance, and need to think about consistency. If everything you push out is, here's another album, 25 bucks. Here's another album, 40 bucks. Got another album, 20 bucks. And you're just constantly saying, buy this, buy this, buy this. You may get some sales, but I can promise you there's going to be a lot of people who will go blind to that. They will not see it any longer. And if you're talking specifically about social media, which we are, you know that there is like massive content fatigue. You just scroll and scroll and scroll, and there's so much information. It's overwhelming. So again, how are you going to stand out? How are you going to make people actually stop scrolling when they see one of your posts? Well, if it's just, I'm selling this album, I'm selling this album, I'm selling this album, that's only going to go so far, because people only have so much money to spend on records, right? And so I think it's very important to provide value to your customers beyond just selling them records. Like, selling them records is the end game, of course. But if you create community, if you provide value, if you educate, then that's going to build trust with that consumer, with that customer. And then when they do have money to spend, who do you think they're going to go to? Like, that's the whole idea. That's marketing 101. That's marketing done right, you know? And so that's the difference between sales and marketing. You want to have a component of sales in there, but that's where marketing comes in and softens it and makes sure that you're also providing value to people that isn't just an exchange of their money for your product, right? The other thing I'll say, or the last thing I'll say on social media, is don't expect all of this to happen for free. I've touched on a lot of things here: creating content, building community, establishing a point of view. Like, if you're a big company, you outsource all this stuff. You hire people to do all this stuff. You have a social media manager. You have a writer on staff. You have a graphic designer. Guess what? You're not going to have any of that. So you're going to have to get scrappy. You got to figure out how to do a lot of this stuff yourself. You got to figure out who you know that are legitimate friends or family who can do some of this stuff, and ask for their help, even if it's just them teaching you how to do things. And in the end, and this is going to lead into our the next section about advertising, is it's going to cost money, not only to create some of this content, to establish it, consistency with that content, and push it out on a regular basis. It may not be daily, maybe it starts out and it's only weekly, but you're going to have to spend money to get it done and to get eyeballs on it, because you're starting from ground zero. Believe me, when you start up in a YouTube channel, or you start a Facebook page, it's really tough in the early days. And one of the biggest advantages, or the biggest things you should take advantage of, is the ability to advertise to kickstart your business. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Advertising and promotions. This is a big one. If you're starting up a restaurant, or you're maybe you're a general contractor, you're opening up your own shop, you're going to start doing work, like, you better have an advertising budget. You better be ready to spend some money to get in front of your target customers, right? A record store is no different. If you have the ability to open up a record store, and again, just people are going to start flooding in on day one, well, you've got the magic touch, right? But that wasn't the case for me, and I suspect it's not the case for a lot of record stores, or any business for that matter. So I would expect, or you should plan to advertise heavily up front. Just like with any business, you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to have a foundation of customers, and that's going to be built with advertising initially. Like, sure, you probably know some people, networked online, or know some people locally who collect records and who might come into your store, and that's great, but they're not going to fuel your business long term. That's a tiny, tiny slice of people who you hope will support you over time, but you got to reach the masses in order to have a thriving business. Even a small shop, even just an online shop, whatever it may be, if you want to be successful, it's going to take a broad customer base, because again, some people drop off and stop collecting. Some people run out of money and just need to take a break. And so you've got to have constantly people coming in, new customers, new eyeballs coming in to see what you're doing online and in the physical world. because there's always going to be people who are going to take a break and who just are going to pause and those types of things. So that's very important. So you need to budget upfront. I can tell you the first, I would say, year, especially the first 6 months when I kind of started NTX, I was spending probably $300 to $500 a month alone on Facebook advertising. Every single weekend, I would be running ads for everything I put into my shops locally or everything I advertise, everything I promoted online. So that's a significant investment. That's a couple $100 a month. I think that's kind of bare minimum, honestly. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to start a record shop, I'm going to go take out a small business loan, or I'm going to borrow some money, or I've got money saved, how much should I have? You need to be budgeting, I would say, a minimum of $500 a month on advertising for social media. Like that's absolutely key. There are other ways to advertise as well. You can advertise on Yelp. You can advertise on Google. These are all important things to look into and experiment with. And that's one of my. That's actually the second thing on my list. Experiment and test different ideas and channels. That's very important. For me, I have found that Facebook is a big driver for me locally of when I advertise, I get the most traction there. Instagram, I don't feel it as much, but again, I haven't experimented and tested as much there. I've also tried Yelp. I've also tried Google. Those things from a location standpoint can be very critical because that's what they're based around. So it depends how heavily your business is based in the local community versus online, or what that combination looks like. But either way, you need to anticipate spending heavily upfront on advertising, whether it be on social media or Google or whatever it may be. And then you want to stick with that. You don't want to be like, all right, I'm gonna sink $500 a month in for 3 months, and then I should be good at that point. No, you've got to continually be in front of people. I'm not saying that budget has to always stay at that number, but you should always be advertising in some shape or form, because the whole key is that you always want to be building your audience. If you're not always thinking, how can I acquire new customers, then your business will get stagnant. That's the worst thing that you can ever have as a business that's just flatlined. You can't have that. It doesn't have to be a hockey stick, but it's at least got to have an upward trajectory. Otherwise, you're going to really start to struggle. Because again, if you're just flatlined here, what happens when the economy tanks a little bit? Or what happens when your local community takes a hit job-wise? Or what happens when people just get tapped out on their budget, how much they can spend? And like I said, they take a break. They used to be buying a record or two a week, but now they're strapped, so they're only coming in once a month, maybe. And so you're going to lose money in that way. And so if you're just here, you're in a really dangerous position. So you always need to think about new customer acquisition. How do you get in front of new people who don't know you exist and who potentially collect, right? That's very, very important. Local versus national advertising, that's very important. What I mean by that is, if you're advertising local, it's very much like, hey, we are located here. We are having a special on this weekend. Come into our shop, use this coupon, whatever it may be, right? Very, very hyper local. That's important, and that's very, very beneficial to you. But if you sell online, which most record stores do these days, I would recommend it. Then you can think bigger. Maybe you ship international. I just said national because, I can ship a record to anyone in the United States. I'm happy to do that. So I try really hard not to constrict myself when it comes to advertising or social media in general to my local market. I always want to keep my local market in mind and always want to give them priority to a certain extent. But at the same time, like, I'm cool with shipping a record and making someone happy no matter where they live in the US if they can buy a record from me and I can get it to them, right? And so you can advertise in that way. Just because I'm based in Dallas doesn't mean I don't do a lot of advertising all across the country when it comes to hot pre-orders, new releases, things like that. You can advertise all over the place. That's the beauty of social media, and you can be very targeted with that. So again, those are things that you're going to need to experiment with. You're going to need to learn how to do. You're going to need to test. It's a lot of trial by fire jumping into this, right? The other thing, speaking about hyper local, I mentioned sales, coupons. You always be thinking about what's going to drive someone into the store, because you've got collectors who, they buy. I would venture to say most record collectors, they are not loyal to any store. They have stores that they like, and they'll shop at those stores. But they're not only going to buy from one store. There's a lot of great record stores out there, physical, online, local, and online, right? And so you got to think again, how do you differentiate? You need to be having ongoing sales. You need to be offering ongoing coupons. You need to be offering, promotions, buy one get one frees. You need to be having events. You need to be attending any local event that where you think your customers will be. Now, maybe you've got a record show in your town that comes around. Those are obviously no brainers for advertising if you're in a record shop. But don't just get stuck inside that box. It's one of the biggest things. Like going to record shows is great. What do you have at record shows? You've got a lot of potential customers, right? And that's fantastic. Obviously, that's in a lot of ways, your target buyer, someone who collects records. What else do you have at record shows? Tons of competition. You've got 20, 50, 100 other vendors all selling records. So it's a hard place to stand out. You got to have some really great inventory, some unique stuff for people to buy from you versus all of the people around you who are also selling records that are good quality, those types of things. So think outside the box. Like go sell somewhere where there's not as much competition, but maybe there's potential buyers, right? So that would be local. Do you have a local bar that you frequent? Maybe you could do a pop up there, have a couple crates. Local venues, festivals, anywhere where a music fan could exist, because maybe there's some collectors amongst those music fans. So you need to think like, who can I partner with? Who can I, collaborate with that will help you get off the ground in regards to establishing an audience. That's going to help you because it'll cost you money, it'll cost you your time, it'll cost you effort. But if you're exchanging all that for new customers, then it's very, very valuable. So the last thing I'll say on marketing and advertising, and this ties back to previous episodes about branding, and I'm a walking billboard for it, right? Is things like t-shirts and stickers and flyers, critical. They cost money, and you're not going to get that money back in most cases. Like I sell a few shirts, but I guarantee you I pretty much break even on all this stuff because of the number of giveaways I do and those types of things, which is fine because it's all advertising and it's all promotional. So those are very, very important things to consider up front. And it's hard because it's tough to go spend good money to get a logo design, get some t-shirts made, get some professional flyers to put in all the boxes that you ship out, free stickers in your shop, free stickers in your packages. Like all of that's money, right? That you're gonna spend up front to invest in your customer to hope they see that your shop is cool and your shop is unique and that you care, and that's why they're gonna come back. All right, last but not least, I do want to touch on a broad bucket, which I'll just call web, right? I've talked so much about social media, and I touched on it in the beginning about owning your own audience. I do want to make sure and call out the importance of owning your own website, having your own web presence, not only in regards to if you sell online, having an e-commerce solution, having a website that a customer can go to and browse your inventory. Obviously, that's hugely beneficial. If you're not selling online, well, then you won't have that component, unfortunately. But even still, having a website that you own, that is not controlled by Facebook or Instagram or Google or whatever it may be, is important. It acts as a home base, and it's critical for discoverability. This is something that a lot of people discount these days because a lot of people, even artists like musicians, there was a few years ago where it was like artists wouldn't even have a website and they would just use their Facebook page. Or this started back even like MySpace. They would just dedicate it to that because that's where all the people were. So you're like, why do you need a website sitting over here on my own .com? Doesn't get any traffic. Just do it all on social media, right? I think you need both. You really do. Again, especially from a discoverability standpoint, because you got to understand when someone goes to Google or they go to Maps, whichever service they're using, Apple, Google, doesn't matter, and they go type in record store. If you don't have a website that is properly optimized, and what I mean by that is it's set up so search engines understand who you are and what you sell, and the fact that you're an actual record shop, then you will not get discovered when someone searches for you. And that is huge. Like, you're at a huge disadvantage if someone in your local area is searching for a record shop and your shop doesn't show up. So how do you fix that? Well, having a website is critical. How do you do that? Well, in most cases, you need to pay someone to design a website, to educate you on how to keep it updated and how to make sure that it is able to be discovered. There are tools these days that can help you do all of that stuff on your own, but it depends how web savvy you are, it depends how tech savvy you are, because again, purchasing a domain, ntxvinyl.com, like, that's the tip of the iceberg. You got to understand then how to create a website from there and how to keep it updated and how to keep it fresh. Even if it's just going to be informational, even if it's just going to say who you are, what you sell, here's your address, here's your hours. It's very, very important. Again, all that information can be found probably on your Facebook page or on your YouTube profile. It needs to be in all those places as well, but I can't preface enough how important it is to have your own web presence. And the good thing is, if you've got a good website, regardless if it has the e-commerce component of shopping or not, you want to integrate all those different channels into your website. So the content should already be done, meaning the content you're putting on YouTube, like, you can go to ntxvinyl.com and all of my latest YouTube videos, they're right there. They're pulled in automatically. Everything that's posted on Instagram, it's pulled in automatically. All new albums that are released from my label, those are pulled in on my website. Like, it's all there for the taking. It's a good place to aggregate it all in the one-stop shop, so that again, when a potential customer lands on your website, because they're local or not, they see all the things you have going on, all the effort you're putting in, all of the personalization you're bringing to the table, so that to differentiate yourself from other record stores online and locally, right? That's the big thing, because customers have choices. Amazon, Target, Walmart. Then you can go to Discogs, and there's thousands of sellers there. Then you can go to your local community. In the Dallas area, there's easily 10 to 15 really good record shops. And maybe your local area doesn't have that competition locally, and that's great for you. So you're going to stand out locally already, but even still, you just need to make sure that you're putting in the effort to show your customer that you care. Like, that's the biggest thing. If you're just trying to take a bunch of records and move them from here to there to make some money, like, you might be able to sustain that as a business. I don't think I could do it. Like, that's why I do so many of the things that I do, is to attempt to show people that I really do care about the music, because in the end, that's why they're going to buy from me versus someone else. And that's the whole idea. So there you go. That is part 6 of how to open a record store. As you can tell, I could talk marketing all day, just like I can talk records all day, because it's really what I've done my entire adult life. So I've kind of merged those two. I've taken my love of music and vinyl specifically, and kind of aligned it with everything I've learned from a marketing perspective over the course of the last 20 years, and that's what I bring here to the table. Hopefully, it helped. By all means, if you have questions, you can always reach me directly. info@ntxvinyl.com will get me via email. That's the best place. You can also try on social media. I try and keep up with those as well, but they get harder to do. So hopefully that was helpful. I think there's one more episode left in this series I'm going to touch on here soon. So if you haven't seen the previous episodes, I'll cue some of those up. Enjoy, and we will see you again soon on Talking About Records.